A muffled knock came like the scrape of bone on stone, and Eddard Stark opened his eyes to the darkness of his chamber in the Tower of the Hand. The rushes rustled under his bare feet as he rose. He reached for a robe against the night air, pulled it around him, and lifted the iron latch. The door opened to a pale oval of a face. Varys seemed to float in the corridor, lantern held low and hooded so his light made a trembling pool on the floor. "My Lord Hand," the eunuch whispered, as if the castle itself had ears close by. "It is done." The words were simple, and their weight sank through Ned Stark like winter water through stone. He knew what they meant before he asked. He had known the shape of the hour by the way the candles had cowered from the windows. "Robert," he said, and his voice found no place to steady itself. "When?" "Soon enough to spare him further pain," Varys replied. "The Septons tended him until the end. He spoke your name and a few others. He was not himself. Death rarely gives a man leave to arrange his words with care." Ned's hand tightened on the door's edge. He thought absurdly of the boar, the reek of wine and blood on the king's breath, and how they all ought to have seen what the gods were engineering when they gave Robert the joy of a hunt and his last enemy in a bristled skin. "Cersei has the letter?" "Not as yet. Ser Barristan guards the body and the chamber, and Lord Renly is in high dudgeon. The small council reconvenes at daybreak to arrange matters." Varys's eyes glittered like oil in lamplight. "We have little time." Ned stood very still. He felt the cold, though the night was not cold. He thought of Robert's voice in the bed, broken but earnest, naming him protector, and of the letter he had taken from the chamber to be sealed with the king's hand, unbreakable under law if not by the hearts of men. He thought of the gold cloaks, and Janos Slint's stout hands, and of Peter Baelish's smile that showed all of his teeth and none of his secrets. He saw the faces of his daughters as they had looked yesterday when he told them they would be sent away from court, Arya defiant and bright-eyed, Sansa pale and furious with wounded pride, and Septa Mordain pursing her lips like a miser counting prayer beads. "You told me once the realm was paramount," Ned said. "What would you have me do for it now? Or for my blood? Do not pretend the two are friends." "I never mistake friends," Varys murmured. "They are so rare that a man must hoard them like rubies. Honesty compels me to say, there will be no place left here for your honesty by sunrise. The Queen knows what you know. Her lions are restless. If you mean to stand with a letter and your name and the king's last breath, you will need swords, and the swords you think you have may not be the ones that answer. If you mean to keep your daughters, my lord, you are not the only man who can slip through palace stones." He let the suggestion hang. The flame of his lantern flinched. "You have a way," Ned said quietly. "I have several, as it happens. The Red Keep is a spider's web, and the spider does not prosper by neglect. There is a brother of the Night's Watch in the city with a knack for vanishing wagons. At dawn, he intends to quit King's Landing with his recruits. He owes you a debt he does not forget. There are also ships, always ships, but we must pass the gates to reach them, and the gates will have eyes by morning, eyes that report to those who do not love you. The Watch's black will draw less notice." Ned looked at him for a long moment. He could smell the sea in the lantern's wind, faint and stale. Choices stood in him like pillars in an old hall. Robert gone. Stannis away to Dragonstone. Renly with his Tyrell youths. The small council a nest of serpents. He had written to Stannis. He had honorably, stupidly told Cersei what he had learned. He had thought then that the law would be a wall, that Robert's seal would be iron. He had not thought of Sansa's tears when he told her she could not marry the prince, nor of Arya's knife of a smile at the thought of leaving. "It is not for me to judge a father," Varys said softly. "I have never been one." Ned's eyes went down to his hands. The right one remembered the weight of a great sword older than any man living. He had left ice on its harness in the solar. He had thought to bear it before the throne when the time came, the way a steward bears keys. He thought now of the sight of it, a dark, unmistakable length of Valyrian steel, and of the way it would be recognized at 100 yards by any man with wit in him. He thought of Lannister hands on its hilt. "Wake Yoren," he said. "Bring him to me. We'll leave by whatever door you trust best. And Varys, my daughters, I won't step into shadow without them beside me." The eunuch bowed. For the first time, the impassive softness of his face cracked with sincerity. "Only a father thinks to name them first," he whispered, and withdrew, his lantern painting the corridor in fragile gold. Ned dressed himself with hands that felt clumsy in their haste. He strapped a short sword over his tunic and chose a cloak of plain brown wool. His bootlaces seemed to mock him with their knots. He paused before ice, touched the dark metal with his fingertips as if the blade might feel his regret, and left it sleeping against the wall like a loyal dog he could not wake. On the writing table lay the letter with Robert's seal, a half-crippled thing, too light in the hand. He took it and tucked it inside his jerkin where he could feel its stiff edge against his chest. He thought to rouse Tomard, Desmond, all of them, but a picture came unbidden. Red cloaks, gold cloaks, the thud of booted feet, a door splintering and a soldier's grin. Varys's words crawled back into his ear. "Not all the swords you think you have will answer." He drew a long breath and rose from the simple comfort of command to the brutal tenderness of secrecy. He wet his lips and went to find his children. He found Sansa in a dream of summer. She always slept as if she knew a painter was looking. Her hair had loosened and draped her like fallen leaves. He knelt beside her and touched her shoulder. "Little bird," he whispered, "wake." She moaned and shifted, thinking perhaps he was a maid with a warming brick. When she saw his face, she sat upright, one hand to her throat. "Father? What is it?" "Dress warmly and quickly," he said. "Take only what you can wear. We are leaving." Her mouth opened and closed soundlessly. He felt pity and anger at once. Leaving? But the Queen, Joffrey. "Father, he will hear of it and he will." "Robert is dead," Ned said, "because lies would not save them. The city will belong to the lions by sunrise. We cannot stay. I will tell you more when there is time." Sansa's eyes gleamed with sudden wetness. She had always been quick to tears when the world denied her its promise. "But I asked the Queen to let me stay. I told her you did not understand. I thought she was kind." He took her hands and squeezed them. He did not tell her how her words might have raced down corridors, how they might have quickened a dozen feet. He only said, "Whatever you told, tell no one now. Listen to me. You put your cloak on, you put on boots, you come with me, and you speak to no one. Not even Septa Mordain. Do you understand, Sansa?" She jerked as if stung. He seldom used her name so sharp. "But Septa, she cannot come," Ned said, because he could only carry so much weight down into shadow. "If I could bring every soul, I would. I cannot. Now, girl. Now." She rose with hands shaking. He watched her struggle with the fastenings and wanted to help, but there was Arya to find and Varys to meet. He turned away before her tears could loosen something in him and went down the corridor, his footsteps soft and sure on the stone he had come to hate. Arya was not in her bed. He did not panic. He knew her second bed, her life's second pillow, was in the dancing master's chamber. He found Syrio Farrell awake and sitting cross-legged on the floor with a candle and a little dagger. He was shaving a grant of wood into nothing but curls. Arya sat against a wall, chin in hands and eyes keen. The sword needle rested across her lap. She took in her father with the swiftness of a cat. "Is it time to go?" she asked without surprise. "It is." Ned was almost relieved. He had dreaded pleading with her as he had with Sansa. "Will you do as I say?" "Sometimes," Arya said gravely, and flashed him a smile. She had ghosts already in her smile. A girl who ran with a direwolf, a girl who stabbed at shadows with a wooden sword. "Is Sansa coming?" "She is," he said, watching Syrio. The Bravosi rose in a fluid movement. His bald head gleamed. "The water receives and the water keeps," he said in his sing-song accent. "This palace is a place of stones and deeper stones. The wind has told me it would try to bite you." Ned bowed his head to the dancing master, whom he had first hired as a kindness to a willful child and whom he now suspected had kept her alive. We owe you more than we can give. You owe me nothing, Syrio said, and his smile held no mirth, only teeth. I will take your beast children to the shadows, and there I will set them in the hands of the very fat pebble with no stones between his legs. Varys's insult became a charm in Syrio's mouth. Arya slung needle to her belt. Do I have to wear a dress? She asked. Not tonight, Ned said. Then I will follow you quiet as a whisper, she said brightly. It will be like a game of monsters and holes. Her eyes darted to Syrio. Will you come? For a little while. Syrio's face changed when he looked at Arya. Not soft but iron-shaped to the shape of her. And perhaps no longer than that. They were at Sansa's door when a door down the hall creaked. Septa Mordane's voice came timidly from the gap. My lord? I hear steps and voices. Is something amiss? Ned had never been deft with women's fears. He did not try for deafness now. Keep your door barred, he said. Do not open for anyone. Dawn will bring answers. He knew dawn brings teeth. He did not add it. He led Sansa out, her cloak hooded over her hair and her face pale as milk. They went by servants' ways, through a pantry that stank of onions and away down steps slick with grease into cellars that seemed to go downward forever. Varys joined them where the air smelled of damp limestone and wine in equal parts. With him came a rangy, disheveled man whose beard was a briar hedge and whose black cloak was older than typhoons. Yoren of the Night's Watch leaned on a cudgel and squinted as if light pained him even here. The hand, Yoren said, and nodded to Ned with a strange clumsy respect. You've no idea how many rats have their nests in this place. I can guess, Ned said. The gate's the thing, Yoren said. I can pass it easy with my lads. Some of 'em are lads. Some of 'em are thicker than lads, but they look like my commerce. The watch takes all sorts. The gold cloaks look away from me if they can. Not because they are kind but because they don't like the smell. Keep your girls sat low and quiet. Shave their heads, and I can call 'em nephews. He flicked a glance to Sansa's hood. That one'll fuss. Sansa made a muffled little cry as if he had struck her. We'll do what must be done, Ned said. He did not look at Sansa, not yet. When? Before the world opens its eyes, Yoren said. The carts will move with the night soil. I'll press close to it and the guards will wave us through fast because no man likes to look long upon his supper in the morning. You, Lord Stark. I come too, Ned said. Yoren shifted and spat. Ho now, a lord of winter pales is a hard thing to make vanish. Put him in a black cloak and he's still tall and sore-looking with duty. Put him in a rag cloak and he looks like a lord in a rag cloak. He'll bring teeth to my tale. My daughters need their father, Ned said. He did not argue the truth of the danger. He only set the danger against the truth of his heart. The watchman scratched under his arm. Aye, and it might be your only chance to keep him. The one with red in her, she'll go back if she can. The other'll go forward whether she should or not. I'll not say no, then, but don't stride. Men who stride have orders. Men who stink have errands. Varys glided toward Sansa. Child, he said without moving his lips from that mild curve they kept. Forgive us what we must steal. It is hair. It will return. Time is cruel but oddly generous with such things. Sansa recoiled, one hand clutching her hood tight, the other slapping defensively at the air. No, she gasped. No, I won't, father, I can't. I am to be the queen. You told me we are to leave. But if the queen calls for me and I am not... Oh, please. Ned forced his hands to be gentle on her shoulders. Listen to me. No one is calling you for anything but a chain. I will not argue here. There is no time. If you love me, if you love your sister, if you ever believed I wish your good, you will do this and you will forgive me later. Sansa, look at me. She looked. He saw the child she had been in Winterfell, making little cloaks from scraps for her doll when her mother was busy. He saw the maiden she wanted to be in the mirror of the court. He saw the woman he could not allow to be made into a prize at the end of a spear. He nodded at Yoren. The watchman took a knife from his belt and a rag. Syrio stood behind Sansa. one big hand steady at her back, and murmured to her not in words but syllables in a rhythm like the sea under a wooden dock. It was a strange comfort. Arya came to stand close to her sister and held Sansa's hand. "I'll do it too," she said fiercely. "Then you can be brave like me." Sansa swallowed a sob and kneaded Arya's fingers until the blood fled her knuckles. Varys lifted the lantern higher and turned it a little so the light shone at an angle. Yoren worked quick. The first slice cut a lock that fell like silk onto the cellar floor. Sansa made a sound that was not a word, and Ned had to look away. He stared instead at the chalk outlines on the cellar wall where kegs had once stood, at the scar of a hook in the ceiling beam, at Varys's soft shoes. The knife went whisper, whisper, and Sansa's hair became a scattered garden of red and gold in the dust. Arya's went quicker because she laughed when the knife tickled and because Yoren knew she would not break. When he finished both, the two girls were as light-headed as acolytes. Sansa held her breath, eyes fixed on the darkness, as Yoren rubbed a little dirt into her scalp to take the gleam away. He did the same for Arya, who smudged her face with both hands for good measure. "There," Yoren said. "Now you are cousins of mine from the muddy end, and you smell enough like it to pass." He looked Ned up and down. "And you are my sister's husband, hard of hearing and softer-headed. Not worth a second look. If anyone asks your name, spit and tell him to ask his mother." Arya grinned. "Can I spit anyway?" "Not on my boots," Yoren said. They moved as a string of shadows, nodding through a tunnel that had not seen sun in a century, up into a narrow ditch that smelled of old rain, and then down again. The city lived above them with its thin, tired breath. Ned felt something in himself settle and harden, a choice becoming iron. Once, he would have stepped into the light and taken his quarrel to men with titles. He had done that all his life. Now he crawled under the world like a rat to keep two girls out of a dragon's mouth. If honor is a sword, he thought, it can also be a shield. This too is honor. At last a square of deeper gray showed ahead, the hint of night outside. Varys drew them into a refuse yard where carts waited like squat beasts. The air was gagging. A man with a pole and a scarf over his nose looked up in surprise. "Two more," Varys told him. "Family." He slid something across to the man's hand. Coin made a metal murmur. The driver glanced at Yoren's black. "I pass you grandfathers and bastards that do not smell so bad as this," he said. "But there's room if they can breathe through cloth." "We can," Arya said through her teeth. Sansa made a sound that might have been assent. Ned lifted his daughters into the wagon and settled between them. His cloak pulled up, his heart heavy and oddly still. Yoren climbed up on the driver's plank and took the reins as if they had always been his. Varys stood beside the cart, lantern nearly closed. "Once you are clear," the eunuch said, "you must become what you pretend. Move slow, move without pride, and let other men notice other things. When you find a place safe enough to send a raven, send it to Dragonstone and to Winterfell. I will hear your absence in the walls and feed different stories to different ears." "Varys," Ned said. "Why?" Varys blinked his soft lids. "Because a father's heart is a bell that rings loudly in my head, and because a realm that drowns in lion blood is of little use to whatever future I hope to see. Go, Lord Stark, before this hour makes a liar of me as it has of so many." Yoren flicked the reins. The cart rolled forward, the wheels making reluctant noises. They moved toward the mud gate in the dark hour before dawn when the city's face drooped and only the eyes of its watchmen were awake. The sound of the sea was a hiss and a sigh. Sansa's hand found Ned's under the cloak and clung like a child's. Arya's knee jostled his, jittering, a colt in a pen. At the gate, torches flamed. The glow painted everything in demon color. Gold cloaks stood wide-legged, their halberds crossed, talking in low voices. The stink of the cart preceded them, and one guard coughed violently behind his square of cloth. "Halt!" He barked by force of habit, then lifted his scarf for a fuller breath. He gagged and waved them on with a curse. Another guard stepped up. He was younger, with a sparse beard and eyes that had seen little more than this gate. "Night soil," he said, as if naming it made him virtuous. Always before dawn, never after hold. In a hurry to dump half the city, are you? Move the lantern that I see what I see. Yoren's voice came out flat, bored. Smell with your nose, sir, if you're keen to know my business. The watch is writ, he added, flinging a stained scrap of parchment with a practiced flick. I have recruits lying in straw that would give a pig pause. They'll be catching cold soon, and then they'll die on the road and be of no use to anyone but the crows. The younger guard took the parchment, frowned at the old black seal, and looked from it to Yoren's colorless eyes. He did not enjoy the thought of arguing with a night's watchman while the stink lashed him. He did not enjoy thinking of Janos Slint's temper either, or the new orders racing down alleys that he had not yet heard. Behind him, a sergeant hawked phlegm into the river and smacked his lips. Let him pass, the sergeant said with weary disdain. The sooner the cart goes, the sooner the smell goes with it. They lifted the halberds like a blessing. The cart creaked through. Ned felt his shoulders loosen by the thickness of a hair. He looked back only long enough to see the torches shrinking and the wall becoming a line rubbed by night. The river took their wheels as if with a lover's palm, and they rolled along the wharf road. Yoren pulled them to a halt under an eave where a clutch of other wagons waited, horses stamping, men in black stretching their backs. To the carts, Yoren grunted. He hopped down and thrust his chin at a tarpaulin-covered wagon with slatted sides. In, you'll find straw. Don't sneeze if you can help it. Don't cough unless you would like the crows to eat you early. Sansa grimaced, but Arya climbed in at once and wriggled into the straw with a glee that made Ned want to laugh and cry. He followed, his knees complaining, and settled on his side. Sansa came last, her movements stiff with humiliation. Yoren threw a blanket over the slats and the world became a thin world. Straw, the smell of horses, the creak of wood, the voices outside turned to insect buzzing. They rolled. The city retreated like a tide. Ned closed his eyes and saw the Red Keep not as a place of feasts but as a fist. He tried to pray and found no words. He counted, instead, the fall of the wheels and ruts and the small sleeps of his daughters, the way Arya's breath came steady, then quick when her dreams ran, the way Sansa tried not to breathe at all. When day fully came, it did not feel like dawn but like a story had changed its teller. Yoren chose a place a mile from the road to halt, between a stand of willows and the hint of a creek. He lifted the tarpaulin and grunted them out. The other recruits spilled from other wagons, 12 or more of them, boys with bad teeth and men with scarred faces and eyes like dogs. One boy wore a bull's head helm a smith had plainly loved too much. He had the shoulders of a younger man who would soon be strong and the stubborn mouth of someone who had not yet learned how to bend without breaking. He stared at Arya and Sansa and Ned with a quick curiosity, then turned away the way a boy turns from a trouble and a secret. Yoren parceled out bread and hard cheese and a skin of thin beer. He stood with Ned under a willow whose leaves were the color of old coins. I'd say the lioness will be clawing at dawn, he said. She is already, Ned answered softly, looking down the long stretch of road that became the neck of the realm. She'll send riders. She may throw the city's gates closed behind us and pretend to honor the dead, but her hand will reach. We must make time. Yoren scratched his jaw. We'll make time enough and no more or we'll draw eyes. The trick is to leave men's minds alone and their noses sour. The lads think I've picked up 3 more souls for the wall. They'll not take heed of what size the souls are if no one tells them.
Ned nodded.
He felt the letter against his ribs like a shard. He thought of ravens. He would need to send words to Winterfell that were more than a thread of ink. Words that would reach Robb. Words that would not break Catelyn's heart only to hand her a different kind of pain. He thought of Stannis sitting on his island sharpening the idea of duty against the salt air. He thought of White Harbor and Lord Manderley, fat and cunning and loyal to old bones. The road offered him a dozen ways to fail and a few to succeed. They would take the few. Arya came up with a smear of straw in her eyebrow and pity in her eyes for Sansa's shame. Sansa had wrapped a scarf about her head and sat apart with her bread untouched, picking at the crust as if it had offended her through malice. Ned crouched in front of her. I know I've wronged you, he said. I do not expect thanks for it. She lifted her chin in automatic refusal, then let it fall. I hate them, she said, not quite daring to speak the name. I hate the city. I hate the smell. I hate that you made me ugly. It's as if. She bit her lip. I shouldn't say it. Say it. As if Lady died for nothing, she blurted. As if everything was to be in song and then. She glanced at Arya and her voice went small. I wanted to be good. I wanted to be good at the things I was supposed to be good at. That's not wrong. It is not wrong, Ned said, his throat tight. You are good at many things I am poor at. But goodness doesn't bind monsters any more than white silk does. It looks well in summer and tears in winter. You will be good again, Sansa, in some place where goodness does not beg to be eaten. She blinked at him. Do you promise? I don't know, he admitted, which startled even himself, for he had so rarely spoken his unsureness. I can promise only that I will try to lead you to a place where your goodness will be safe. That is all a father is, a barking dog on a night road. Arya snorted. You are a big dog, she informed him. Bigger than anyone's dog. Let us hope I can bite like one, he said and attempted a smile. Felt like it belonged to another man. They moved again before noon, taking to the road among a line of carts and farm folk who had no notion their company had become richer. All that day the wheels rolled and the dust came up like ghosts from the stones of the King's Road. The hedges on either side stood thin and begrudging. Once they saw a line of soldiers in red and gold cloaks riding fast toward the city, faces closed. They passed within 20 yards of Yoren's slow caravan, and none of them looked sideways. The wind tugged at Ned's cloak and whispered stories in his ear that he could not afford to believe. They camped that night in a field gone to stubble. The stars came out clear. There were fewer fires than there should have been for a band that size. Yoren liked to make the dark do his work. Ned lay on his back, hands behind his head, and listened to Arya's breathing soften. He could not sleep. He saw Robert's grin on a hunting day when the king had turned to say something vulgar and warm about boars and women. He saw Cersei's cool eyes. He saw a boy with golden hair at a window, looking down at a world that would never say no to him again. He saw a headman's block made from a smooth log that had seen too much of human necks. He did not see Winterfell because that would break him. Sometime in the hours when the field's flickers died and only the cold was awake, he felt a presence and opened his eyes. Varys sat, improbable and precise, at the edge of the dim circle of their fireless camp. Ned shot to sitting, hand on his sword hilt. The eunuch raised his hands in a fish's gesture, placating. How? Ned began. There are, Varys murmured, ways. I am not here to be followed, only to follow my own rules. I came to bring you one small piece of news before it becomes stale. Renly has fled also, with Ser Loras and a singer and the better part of the king's cups. He rides south to his lily fields. The queen will try to make of this cowardice a sign of treason and of your absence guilt. Her guards went to the Tower of the Hand at dawn and found you vanished. They were not pleased. There was blood. I am sorry. Whose? Ned's voice did not shake. It was a thing he could do. He saw Tomard's big hands, Hullen's way with horses. Some of the men you brought south, Varys said. The steward, Vayan Poole, has been taken for questioning. He made the word sound like a place one is sent and not allowed to leave. Septa Mordane was found praying. The queen is not merciful this morning. Ned closed his eyes. He tasted rust. Catelyn, he said, I must get word to her. You are northward bound, Varys reminded him gently. She is at the Eyrie, unless she has moved. A raven to Moat Cailin will scatter north faster than any rider. Send it there and to White Harbor. Send your oldest words to Lord Manderley, and your newest to your son. Robb will need to know a different story than his mother. We tell different tales to boys. Ned forced air into lungs that felt like staves. What tale should I tell a boy who might soon be a lord and a leader? The truth would be a kindness and a cruelty both. Yes, Varys agreed. He must understand that men he has never seen will call him names and expect him to be those names, will ask him for their bread and give him their broken oaths. If you live to tell him that yourself, this world will be less cruel than I expect. Thank you, Ned said, meaning it and hating that he meant it. I wished once never to owe you any debt I could not repay. And here you are, poor and rich both, Varys said. I will not come again. It does me no good to be too generous. Good night, Lord Stark. He rose from the grass like a cloud, leaving a field and vanished without shadow or sound. The next day they crossed a little stream where the stones were white as bones. Yoren took them up a sheep path to avoid a clutch of men in leather jerkins with bright bits of cloth at their wrists. Outriders, he muttered, peering between brush. Not city men. Lions hire men who look hungry. These look hungry enough to eat their own saddles. He nudged the caravan into a stand of pines and made them wait. Sansa took the time to rewrap her scarf and keep her hands busy with a bit of cloth that had once been a sleeve. Arya crouched and watched the world like a heart at water. The men on the road wore bits of crimson in air as if the color itself were a weapon. They had the look of the Westerlands about them. Strong shoulders, a taste for ornaments. One had a hound's head burned into the leather of his breastplate and laughed often without sound, his shoulders twitching. Another had a face like a stall wall. They passed, dust rising, and the dust was the only part of them that wanted to go near the black-robed band in the trees. Soon, Yoren said after they were gone, the road will be a mouth. Then we will be the tongue that knows where not to be bitten. They moved again. A boy with the bull helm dragged a sack along and grunted. You there? Arya said to him, because she was Arya and because curiosity burned her like a fever. What's your name? Why do you wear that? The boy looked down at her with a square expression. Gendry, he said. I wear it because I made it and because I like the way it looks. Why's your voice like a girl's? Because I am a girl, Arya said proudly. He snorted. Yoren said all of you were boys. Yoren lies a lot because it keeps him and us alive, Arya said. Where are you from? A smith's yard in King's Landing, he said. He looked toward the road, toward nothing visible. I'm going to the wall, he added, as if that explained everything. Why? He shrugged and shifted the weight of his sack. He had arms like he had been born to iron and strong backs. Because they told me to go there, and Yoren said I should come quick, and if I didn't he'd drag me, he said. I had nothing worth staying for. I worked. I hit hot things with hammers. It was all right. Arya considered this and made a face at Sansa, who was pretending not to listen. You shouldn't drag girls by their hair, Arya told him sternly. I won't, Gendry said. I don't even know your hair. Looks like dirt. He grinned then, sudden and true, and went to adjust the harness on a mule that had got its strap twisted. Sansa stared after him. There was something in his face. She could not name it. Some shape tugged at her memory. Some man's smile she had last seen in a bed smelling of wine. She closed her eyes and breathed. She opened them and found her father watching her. She did not speak. He did not either. It was a small pact that did not require words. They did not stop at any inn, though the wagons beside them peeled off at times to seek beer and gossip. Yoren stayed on the road and off it by turns, and when the sun sank they nested in whatever hollows could hide them. Once they slept in an abandoned sheepfold whose walls were mossed, and the sky above looked like a lid with pinholes. Arya climbed the wall and lay on her back and told Sansa the shapes of the stars by names that were not the ones their septa had taught. Wolf's Eye, Milk Tooth, Cat's Tail, and Sansa corrected her in a whisper, because even now she took comfort in knowing things. They fell into sleep without meaning to, and Ned lay awake for a time listening to the quiet of their breathing and the faraway creak of trees. On the fourth day, a man found them. He came out of scrub where a deer path crossed the main road, alone, wearing a tabard that had once been bright with a yellow dog catching a ball, though now it was pale and mud-stained. He had the look of a soldier who had lost his company and his cause, but his eyes were not the eyes of a lost man. They slid over the wagons and made little arithmetic sounds. His horse made no noise at all. "Ho there!" He called in a voice that wanted to be merry and was not. Night's Watch, I've a message from the city for any travelers. There's a bounty on certain heads and a warning on others. The Queen wishes the realm to know that traitors skulk in rags. The Hand has fled with his bastard girls. He had the grace to smile as if the jest amused only him. Not that any of these are such. Not that they are, Yoren agreed, dry as lime. And if they were, what would a dog of the Lannisters do with 2 more bones? I serve the realm. You serve it, the man said, that almost merry smile drying. We all do in our way. The Hound rides north, they say, with a nose for the scent. Yoren spat. He rides for his own temper. I ride for the wall. The wall is not north. The wall is where things stop that should not go further. You've said your message. Say to your queen that the Night's Watch remembers old oaths better than new bounties. And tell your mother she raised you to waste your voice on men who don't want it. The man cocked his head, amused despite himself, and shook his reins. If you see a wolf, tell it to run. If you see a stag, tell it is too late. If you see a lion, tell it to eat with manners. He wheeled his horse and went away at a lope. Yoren watched him go with a stone's patience. Hounds, he muttered. They put the fear of their teeth in the road and hope men think that's the same as the smell of them. That night, Ned made a choice that tasted of iron. He took aside a crow of the watch who could write a fair hand and gave him words for 2 ravens. One was a plain thing to mote Kaelin and Winterfell. I live. I flee the lions with your sisters. Call the banners only to defend the north and the neck. Hold the moat. Do not march without my command. Send stout men south to hold the causeway. He signed it with his name and told them to put it to every bird that would carry it north. The other was for White Harbor and Dragonstone both, writ clean twice. To Lord Wyman Manderley. By the grace of the king who is now dead, be the harbor that remains loyal to the bones that built it. We will come if we can by road, or by ship if we must. I was named protector of the realm by Robert in his last hour. The letter of his seal is in my hand. I will not claim in the city what lions can seize by force. I will stand on the law on a northern stone if I may, and then go where duty directs. To Lord Stannis. The same words with fewer courtesies. Cersei's children are bastards of Jaime Lannister. I have sealed word of it with the king's seal. Come and take what is yours before Renly makes a farce of honor. I will bring the North's law to your claim. Yoren scratched his jaw when he read them. You are still a lord even when you're a rat, he observed. I only know how to be what I am, Ned said. That'll do as flaws go, Yoren said, and sent the birds black into the night. The next 2 days were the color of dust. They passed a little sept where an old woman swept the steps with the same diligence with which she would have swept her own soul if given a broom. They passed a mill whose will creaked a complaint in every tongue. The Hound did not find them. His shadow fell across the road once in the distance, riders with him sniffing at the world like hunters who had forgotten what deer smelled like, and they stopped and waited while those shadows became nothing. The recruits picked up songs. A crude thing about a girl and her geese, a sad thing about a man who could not stop moving his feet lest he fall. But Yoren hissed at singing and the sound died into humming under breath. Sansa found her throat working on a melody she had learned from the singers in the Red Keep and stopped, ashamed and fiercely unwilling to be ashamed. Arya tried to skip and had her ears boxed by Yoren, which made her glare and behave for an hour. On the 7th day, they came upon the mouth of a village that had been chewed. Houses were empty, doors kicked. There was a smell of old smoke and new fear. A chicken scuttled under a fence that had been broken by a horse. A boy's toy, a little knight made from a shank of wood with a nail for a sword, lay in the ditch, the nail rusting. Lions, Yoren said, low and flat, or men who want the village to think so. Off the road. Fast. They were moving when they heard horses. Not the hound's heavy thunder, but a more numerous sound. Men who rode like they had done it their whole lives and did not think twice. They were red and gold and they did not bother to hide it. The outriders found tracks because any fool could have found them. They came through the hedgerow with faces like drawn bows and drew rein at the sight of a night's watch caravan. "Halt!" their leader called. He wore no helm and had hair like straw in winter barn light. "In the king's name." "Which king?" Yoren asked in a tone that made a few of the riders grin despite their orders. "Joffrey, first of his name," the man said quickly, as if a prompt had been whispered in his ear. "Who are you to ask?" "A brother who has sworn off names," Yoren said. "I am to the wall what your ass is to a saddle, useful and nothing else. Move on." The man scowled. His hand tightened on his reins. His horse's nostrils flared. "We search wagons for a traitor," he said. "Lord Eddard Stark, late the hand, fled the city like a thief, and his children with him. If you would not be suspected of helping him, you will lift your tarpaulins and show your recruits." Yoren spat in a gesture that might have been in any book of courtesy if it had been drawn as a star. "I don't lift the cover on my shite for the likes of you," he said. "This is the night's watch. You want to be so brave as to stick your pretty head under that tarpaulin, you go ahead and breathe deep. You will see boys with more lice than sense and men who smell worse than the truth. What you will not see is the Lord of Winterfell wrapped in straw. He's taller than that, and his pride would stab through." There was a snicker among the riders, quick and nervous. The leader's face went red. "Open it," he said, and kicked his horse forward. Ned's hand found Sansa's and Arya's at once under the covering. He felt their bones and thought of how small bones crack. He let go and reached for the short sword at his side because it was time, perhaps, to be what he had always thought he would be in such a moment. The tarpaulin hauled back. Straw fell away. Light slammed into their eyes. The red and gold men peered in. They saw 3 figures wrapped in brown and gray, faces smudged with dirt and unremarkable misery. They saw a man with a beard 2 days too long and eyes that had learned to look old. They saw a girl with her chin out and a scar on her brow made by imagination. They saw another with her mouth set stubborn against tears. They saw what they thought they were meant to see and nothing they were not told to see. "Name," the leader snapped at Ned. "Aren," Ned said, letting the sound be eaten by a cough. "My sister's lad," he added with a shrug, pointing at Arya. "Hard head, thick as 2 stones. Doesn't know his letters from his arse yet. The other is older. Not so much trouble. Meals go in where they should." "You speak too clean for a ditch man," the soldier said. "And you smell too nice for a watchman," Ned shot back in a voice that had no time for the world. "Look your fill." The man scowled, glanced at the girls with a disdain that did him credit in its ignorance, and let the tarpaulin fall. He turned away. He never saw the shape of something under the straw, an oiled bundle of paper with a seal impressed through wax into more wax and then into parchment again, like a law upon the weather. They moved away, the riders taking the road toward the torched village. Yoren's hand shook on the reins only a little. He nodded toward Ned's invisible body with a respect that was not quite gratitude and not quite salute, something more like recognition. "You lie like a lord," he muttered. "I have had poor teachers," Ned said dryly, and in the next breath made himself as small as the wagon would allow. He felt Sansa's hand find his again, and he squeezed it, and thought of the way even the bravest men sometimes needed to touch something that would touch them back. News ran along the King's Road like rats. Some of it true, most of it raven-feathered nonsense. A day later they heard from a cowherd's boy that Cersei had seated her son on the throne and cut the king's last letter in half and fed it to a dog. A merchant with a cart of barley flour that had gotten damp declared he had it from a cousin in the city that Stannis had sent ships to close the Blackwater and lay siege to his own nephew. A singer who had lost his harp told a tale of Renly crowned at Highgarden with flowers in his hair. Yoren listened to all and believed nothing because that was his way. They passed into the Riverlands proper. The air changed. The soil seemed to breathe deeper. Yoren took them off the King's Road into tracks that only sheep and men who were not supposed to be men used. Their food grew meaner. Arya found mushrooms and insisted on eating them, and Yoren smacked them out of her hand and showed how the little ring spoke of death and how to tell the false from the true. Sansa learned to clean a pot with sand and to sleep even when men snored like hogs. Ned learned to keep the short sword loose in its sheath without touching it every time a leaf fell the wrong way. Near the Red Fork they came upon a ferryman without a ferry. The rope had been cut. He stood on the bank wringing his hat and looking as if the whole world had decided to move without him. "Lions," he said, when Yoren asked, and spat into the river. "Or wolves. Or both." He looked doubtfully at the black cloaks and the wagons. "You going to the wall? Best go fast. There's talk of armies moving like weather. River lords roused, and Lannisters pricking their arses from every village." "We move like slow rain," Yoren said, tossing him a coin anyway. "The river will be lower by evening," he added, peering at the drift of sticks caught on a rock. They forded at a shallower bend and slept on the far bank under a sky like hammered tin. Sansa woke in the dark with her heart making a noise like broken bells. She had dreamt of the throne room, not as she had seen it but as songs would have painted it. Glory and light and the noble kneeling, and then, like a jug overturned, the picture washed out and left bare stone. She wanted to sob with the unfairness of it and hated herself for wanting. She sat up and found Arya awake, eyes like two small blazes. "What?" Sansa asked, half unwilling to let her voice be heard by the dark. "Nymeria," Arya said softly, not looking at her. "Sometimes I feel like I can smell the river the way she does. Like I'm running and everything is sharp and teeth." "Stupid," she added fiercely, as if daring Sansa to agree. "It's not," Sansa said, surprising herself. "I dreamed of Lady once since," she swallowed. The place behind the words ached. "She was running too," she said. "I couldn't keep up." Arya looked at her then. There was so much not said between them it filled the night like fog. "We'll run to Winterfell," Arya said. "We'll walk," Sansa said, attempting calm, and Arya snorted a laugh that startled even her. When they were a good week north of the capital, news reached them on both wings, a raven to the watch and a whisper on the wind. The raven was from Winterfell. Robb's hand, bold and boisterous. "We hold the moat. We called the banners to carry stones and timber, not swords. The Umbers swear loud, the Manderleys fatly. I keep them quieter than they like. Mother gone from the Vale. She rides to meet us. Are you safe? Father, trust me." It sounded like a boy trying on his father's coat and finding it heavy but not unwearable. The whisper on the wind came from a peddler who came upon them at a stream and asked for a drink. "They say the Kingslayer's taken the Riverlands like a fox in a henhouse," he said, wiping his beard with the back of his hand. "Edmure Tully will have his hands full. Lord Tywin's split his host. One head goes toward Riverrun, the other toward the Green Fork. The Red Priests say the gods are awake. I say men are." Ned thanked him and gave him bread. He felt a sick relief. War would break in any case, with him or without him, clean or dirty. He had only hoped to keep his daughters out of the first spray. On the 10th day, a shape rode out of the trees with a limp and a blade too clean. He raised his hand high at the sight of Yoren's wagons and grinned like a skull. "Halt," he said. He wore no livery, but the men behind him wore bits of crimson and bits of nothing, and all of them wore the look of those who believe anything they do is destiny. "Night's Watch. Good. We like the Watch. The Watch has no lord but the Wall. We're collecting a tax for the Wall. It's called Don't Die Here. Coin will do. Women will do. If you've none, boys sometimes do." He laughed, and his men laughed because the world had arranged itself so that they had to. Yoren did not bother to spit. He did not have enough spit for this much of the world. He swung down, cudgel in hand, and said mildly, "You like breathing?" The man laughed again. "Oh, I love it. I'll make sure you keep doing it," Yoren said, and hit him in the throat. Later, Arya would swear that the cudgel moved faster than any sword. The man gagged, eyes bulging, hands slapping at his neck like a fish. The riders behind him lurched, and the calm world broke into running and screaming. Ned went over the side of the wagon like a younger man. The short sword was in his hand as if it had grown there. He did not shout. He moved low and quick because a man who had learned to fight in winter did not waste his breath on noises. He met the first raider as the raider tried to bring his horse around, and he cut the tendon of the leg that held the man's weight. The raider shrieked and fell, and the horse bit him in the shoulder and bolted. Another man came, and Ned cut him across the knuckles, so the man's sword fell with the fingers that had held it. There was yelling, blood. The smell of iron was everywhere, and the cries of frightened beasts. Sansa curled into the wagon and pressed her hands over her ears, tears leaking out between fingers she willed to be stalwart. Arya slid under the wagon and watched the whole mess with a gaze like a knife edge, counting, remembering. The raiders broke when they understood that men in black could hit hard, and that a tall man who looked poor could move like an old sword moved in good hands. Yoren cracked one man's head with his cudgel so cleanly there was no blood at first, only a sound like someone stepping on a sun-dried gourd. Gendry swung a hammer he had not found but had been born with in some other life, and the face he hit ceased to be a face. The rest fled in twos and threes, and those who could not fled died on their backs watching clouds that did not care. Yoren stood breathing like a bellows. "We've bled enough noise onto the road," he said. "We move now. We leave the dead for the crows and the lazy gods that like carrion." Ned wiped his blade on dead leather and looked to his daughters. Sansa let him pull her to her feet. Her face was white but not with the old kind of fear. There was something like understanding making a hard shape under it. Arya slid out and examined a fallen knife with interest and suppressed respect. "Give me that," Ned said, taking the knife. He tucked it away. He wanted to say many things about the way men die and the way a good blow feels and does not feel. He said none. He said, "We move now." They moved. The road behind them did not move. The dead men lay, and crows took to the air like a dark prayer. 2 days after, a rider found them who knew them because he knew no one and nothing else. He wore a dire wolf on his breast, and his horse had been ridden near to death. He fell from the saddle and grabbed Ned's cloak as if grabbing a tree in flood. "Lord Stark," he gasped. "By the gods, Lord Stark." Ned held him steady. "Breathe," he said, because men forgot. The rider's eyes found Sansa and Arya, took them in with stupefied joy, and he laughed and wept both. "I have ridden with your men for 2 days, he told Ned, gulping. "Robb Stark sent me south from Moat Cailin with 50 and a flag, you know. We've placed them along the causeway and every creek with bottom to it. Lord Umber sings. Lord Manderly eats. Your lady wife rides with a band from the Vale. The bones of the neck will slow any without luck. There is to be no war in the north unless you declare it." "Good," Ned said. He felt some little thing in his chest, small as a seed, push against the cold earth. Sansa's shoulders loosened. Arya threw back her head and hooped like a boy. Yoren grunted, pleased and suspicious that he was pleased. Even Gendry grinned. The world had not yet killed the idea that sons can be brave at the right time. The rider swayed and steadied himself. "There is more," he said with a look as if he offered both wine and acid. "Word from Dragonstone. Lord Stannis will receive ravens but has sent none reply. Word from White Harbor. Lord Manderly says his kitchens ever have room for loyal men. He will keep ships ready in case you choose the sea. He bids you come under his roof if you can. He writes of seals and banners like a man describing pies. It is goodwill in a fat suit."
Ned nodded slowly.
"We go to White Harbor," he said, and then, because he heard something like a voice with Robert's salt in it, he added, "We go there by roads no man of the Lion will think to watch. We move like water through tall grass. We will become smaller than the road wants us to be." Yoren chuckled and spat. "You're learning," he said. "I'd put you in black if you weren't already wearing too much weight." They bent the road to their will. They went through willows and under alders. They shared food with millers, and Sansa learned to say thank you to women with hands as chapped as bark. They washed in cold streams and laughed afterward because laughter made the cold forget their bones for a while. Arya practiced with a stick against Gendry's hammer haft until Yoren cuffed them apart. Sometimes at night Sansa woke and did not immediately know where she was. Once she woke and found Arya already awake, and they did not speak because there was nothing to say that would hold the shape it needed to hold. They lay with their father between them and matched their breaths to his like a small spell against the dark. On a day when the sky seemed to have forgotten how to be blue, they crested a hill and saw the Bay of Seals in the far distance like a knife of light. Sansa caught her breath. She had not known that relief could make a sound. White Harbor lay beyond sight but not beyond hope, and the road smelt faintly of salt. Helms and banners sprouted from the next hollow like weeds. Ned stiffened and gestured them down. Yoren hissed. The band that came up the slope to meet them wore no crimson, no roaring lions, no hounds' heads grinning. They wore merman green and wolf gray. At their head, fat as rumor and twice as satisfied, rode Ser Wylis Manderly of White Harbor, flanked by men too well fed to be as quick as they would have liked. He lifted a hand like a loaf. "Lord Stark," he called, as if the whole hill were his hall and they his guests come late to supper. "The gods be good and full-bellied. It is you. My lord father bid me ride out to sniff the roads for worthy smells. I catch the scent of the north and it is sweet." Ned wanted to sag and did not. He went forward with caution until he saw the kindness of that face was not pretense. He stopped within reach of the green banners and bowed his head an inch, the most a man like him could do, and not feel his spine frown at him. "Ser Wylis," he said, "your father's welcome is a harbor in itself." "It is a harbor with pies," Wylis boomed, beaming. He looked at Sansa and Arya and his eyes warmed like ovens. "And little maids who look like they have been served a dog's breakfast when they ordered a prince's feast. Come, my halls are open. My kitchens are sin." Yoren cleared his throat. "We will not overstay," he said, glancing at Ned, a question. "We will stay long enough to breathe," Ned said, "and to find a ship if we need one, and to send letters and read the sea." They went under green banners and into the ways that lead to White Harbor, and for a time it seemed possible that the world did not only eat but also fed. Lord Wyman Manderly himself waited in his hall, large enough to be 3 men and shrewd enough to be one good one. He kissed Sansa's brow with a father's gentleness and shook Arya's hand as if she were a boy, and he bowed to Ned as deep as a fat man can bow and still keep his breath. "You come under my roof as if it were Winterfell," he said, and Ned felt the good weight of those words. The halls of White Harbor smelled of roast meats and the sea. The girls were given baths that made them yelp and laugh, and soft things to wear that did not scratch, and food that tasted like home the way fat can. Ned washed the road from his skin and looked at himself in a polished piece of steel that served as a mirror. He looked like someone who could still be used by the gods for some purpose, if the gods had regard for men's purposes. Ravens flew from White Harbor like thoughts, to rob with words more precise now that they had safety under a guest's roof, to Dragonstone with the letter and without, to River unto Catelyn with a plea and a warning and love, to the little houses of the north that had always loved Winterfell because their fathers had and because some places settle love in men the way stones begin to grow lichen. Wyman Manderly read the letters that came, chewed them like beef, and gave back replies like sausages, the kind of thing that looked humble and fed armies. In White Harbor's lord's chambers, Ned met with ship captains who had salt in their beards and sense in their eyes. One promised to run the narrow sea to Dragonstone if the coin's weight was right and the knight was clever. Another promised to take the girls by sea to White Harbor and thence by river to the heart of winter if war closed the road behind them. Ned sat with maps spread like linens and listened to the tide's throat, and for the first time since the Tower of the Hand breathed from a place deeper than fear. "What will you do?" Lord Wyman asked him one evening when the girls had gone to bed and Yoren had found a stall he liked better than any bed. They sat at a table with cups of wine between them, and the windows allowed in the distant shush of the sea. "Hold the north," Ned said. "Seal the neck. Make the lions pay for each stone they step on if they come that way. Call men who can read the law and hold it like a torch. Stand behind Stannis if he will act quickly and cleanly. Ignore Renly unless he comes with more than songs. Pray that my wife forgives me for leaving men to die in a castle I could not defend." Wyman's big hand fluttered, surprisingly delicate for its size. "You speak like a man who has been humiliated by hard wisdom," he said, not unkindly. "It will make you better if it does not kill you." "I have daughters," Ned said simply. "I am permitted to be better." Wyman chuckled until it turned into a cough. When he recovered, he leaned forward. "And the letter?" The king's hand on it? The thing that can be waved in men's faces when they have forgotten to be ashamed. It is here, Ned said, touching his breast. We will use it when using it buys more than it costs. Wyman pursed his lips, then nodded. You have learned. In the room that was theirs that night, Sansa sat brushing the short, coarse hair that had begun to prick her scalp again. She wore a gown lent by Lady Leona Manderley, and it was soft and green and did not belong to her yet. Arya lay on her stomach with a knife she was not supposed to have, carving a bit of soap into something with too many legs. She looked up when Sansa stopped brushing. I still think of him, Sansa said, without meaning to speak of Joffrey and having spoken of him anyway. As if I said it right it would be mine again. That was foolish. Songs make fools of things on purpose, Arya said, not looking up from her many-legged creature. It's what they do. I like them anyway. So do I, Sansa admitted. I just like knowing when they end. And how. They don't, Arya said, and grinned like someone who had learned to like a bad taste because it meant she could stand it. They stop because people stop singing. She stabbed the soap and it broke into 3 pieces and she laughed. This one had it coming. Sansa laughed too, quietly, because White Harbor's stone made sounds travel differently than Winterfell's and because laughter here tasted of meat and not of fear. Father says we will be safe soon, she murmured, as if saying so to herself could make of the words a roof. Arya tested the broken soap thing's leg and it came off in her fingers. Father says what father thinks will keep us alive, she said. But he doesn't lie to feel better. He lies to kill the lie. She thought a moment and then shrugged. I don't know what I mean, she admitted.
I'm sleepy.
Sansa set the brush down. I know, she said gently. It means he will do the ugly things so we can do the pretty ones again one day. I will hold that in my hands and be careful not to drop it. Outside, the seaside, going on with its old work of wearing the world's edges smooth and then making them sharp again. On the tower roof, a man with a horn blew once for a ship coming in on the tide, and the horn's note shifted the city's breath. In a chamber lit with a single candle burned shorter than it had been in years, Eddard Stark read his son's reply with eyes that had learned to be both father and lord and understood they were one. The realm had already begun to tear at every seam. Far to the south a green standard rose that should have been laughed at and would not be. On Dragonstone, a man with a jaw like stone counted and sat with his anger like a tide that would not turn. In the west, a lion considered how a north without its lord might be taken piece by piece. In the river, a fish prayed and sharpened pikes. In the vale, a woman with too much fear sucked on her fear like a sweet. Far north, beyond the wall, other things moved that did not care about lions or wolves or the words of men. For this one night, in the fat harbor that fed a hungry world, a father slept with his daughters safe under one roof, and no song had the bad taste to wake him. He dreamed of Winterfell's godswood, and of snow that did not bite. He woke before dawn, as he had taken to doing, and went to the window to breathe the cold sea air. He rested his palm briefly on the place in his jerkin where the letter lay and felt the wax through the leather like a heart too hard to beat. Then he turned to wake Sansa and Arya with a touch and a whisper, not because they needed to rise so early but because he wished to take the habit of waking his girls into whatever came next.